session. Okay. I'm trying to start on time here. Get us going. Okay. All right. So we're reconvening to open session. Council Lackey, will you report out of closed session meeting, please?
Thank you, President Womack. There is no reportable action.
Okay. All right. So I think we start with public hearing. Public hearing to receive input from the community regarding the creation of a district-based election system. Ron?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be back in the boardroom. It's our first live meeting since a year ago, March. As Chris announced, this is a public hearing to receive input from the community about moving towards a district-based election system. As we've talked about in the past, back in January, the district decided to take action to avoid possible a demand letter that would put us in the position to have to spend money. So we adopted a resolution declaring the intent to go to transition to by-area elections. As the time passed and we had a chance to research consultants and the other issues surrounding moving to that type of system, we did bring to you a proposal from Cooperative Strategies to provide the services for you. And so tonight we do have David Lopez from Cooperative Strategies, and I will turn it over to him.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am with Cooperative Strategies. My name is David Lopez. I'm a senior director for our firm, and we help cities, special taxing agencies, special agencies, K through 12, and school districts and CCDs with a variety of facilities, funding, and planning, and financial advisory, demographic services. This time of year, because of the census, I mean, this is always kind of a hot button topic, but with the census coming out, this particular process, it's not unique to you guys. All kinds of entities across the state are going through this right now, and it's all based on a kind of a time system that is set from about now until January, February, and I just wanted to cover some basic things about it because this is the first meeting, and hopefully I'll be up for more. I am a Central Coast native, so it's always good to get back and stay at my parents' and not charge you guys for hotel. I also, in this area, I see some fire and police, is it? When I was growing up in this area, I paid my way through college being a Forest Service firefighter, so I love coming out here. I love Montana de Oro. I love going up to Cambria, and I hope I get to spend the weekend doing that, so thank you for having me. That said, I want to talk to you a little bit about this process here, and we're going to go through each slide, and then right here.
Oh, Ron, can you click onto the,
Where do I need to go?
just click onto this, that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now you should be able to do it, let's see.
Got it, okay. So just a little bit of background. I know it was mentioned in the introduction here. The California Voting Rights Act, or CVRA as we know it, it took place in January 2003. Essentially, it prohibits at-large elections if a particular protected class impairs the ability of them to have a choice or ability to determine an outcome of an election. Now, protected class is a term that's used a lot in modern day. You hear it in labor. It's, technically I think it's a male over 40 or a woman in labor, but that's not what this is. This is a historical, this is from the Federal Voting Rights Act, and what it is, it's basically defined as a race or ethnic group or historical minority group that is under the protected class. So this board has taken action to approve a resolution adopting, a transition from at-large voting to voting area, or trustee areas as they're called. And really, as I said, local agencies all over the place are getting sued left and right, and so that's why they're taking proactive approaches before they get a demand letter. And hopefully we can, as we present this to you, it'll make more sense, and then this will be an easy transition process, and we can answer your questions as a slide by slide or at the end of this. So the process here, this is determined by statute. It's California Voting Statute 110. It requires a minimum of 4 meetings to be held, 4 public hearings, 2 of which are these pre-map hearings, and then 2 are the actual discussing the scenarios that are drawn up once we have the census data. And by the way, I should add that the census data is expected to be available either at the end of this month or the first week in September. And that's going to tell us more about the population and other factors that affect your agency here. Now, we do things from experience. We add another meeting in here because sometimes things don't get resolved in the mandatory 4 meetings, so kind of best practices, we have a 5th meeting. But this gives you the timeline of when we will be going through these various steps. And again, this is determined by statute, so after this meeting, there's another one where the community or the board members can mull it over and have a month to come back and ask more particular questions. And then we go into more details in October, November about particular scenarios. So that said, this is the timeline for doing that with the intention of looking at 2022, November 8th, to actually hold elections by voting area. So there's a couple of considerations here, and I would say the most important one, there's 2 most of the important ones. There's 2 main points here. A lot of these are what we try to do. 2 are really what we have to do, and that is we have to take into account the population. So when we get the census data and we draw up, say, 5 trustee areas, they can't be more than 10% difference in population between them, and we'll certainly try to make that even narrower, but that's determined by statute. You can't have somebody have 50,000 people in one voting area and then have less in another, so it has to be within 10% of what the adjacent areas are. The other main factor that's a must is that, and we use this colloquially as cracking and packing. You can't take, and I'll use an example like an LA metropolitan area. If you have a particular ethnic group that has, that would fall into 2 trustee areas, you can't split them so that they have less voting power or spread them out among 4 of them so they no longer have that voting potential. And that's known as, and cracking, you're diminishing and diluting their voting. And then packing, of course, is cramming everybody into one voting district where they can only vote for one trustee. So those are the 2 main points here that are musts. The rest of these are what we try to do pursuant to the recommendations in statute, and these are listed in order that we have to draw things according to the Federal Voting Rights Act, and that includes the population that I discussed. But whenever possible, we have to have these compact and contiguous areas. You can't have them, not have any basis in fact. They have to respect communities of interest, and that's one of the reasons we're here. As an example, we might have census data and know what everything is about your community from that. But you may tell us there's neighborhoods that have always been together, their kids go to the same school, you have religious groups here, they're packed into one area, we wouldn't see that in the census data. So that's kind of why the community input is also required and important. Whenever possible, we also have to follow man-made and natural boundaries, geographic features. When we draw these up, they can be different sizes. Again, they're going to be based on population, but you may have one area that's geographically larger and 4 that are smaller, and again, it's tied to population density. But we want to also take into account natural geographic features, and you'll see that as we start doing scenarios down the road. Whenever possible, respect incumbency. I will tell you at the end of this on my question slide, I'll try to be proactive and tell you the 2 biggest questions we get asked when people are transitioning here. And then other local considerations, and that's really where your input comes into play. We're demographers, we travel the state, we know the area, even I'm local, but we don't know precisely what happens in your community, and that's why it's crucial to get your input as far as that goes. So that said, these are the considerations that go into it when we factor in what we're going to propose as voting areas. Some information based on the last census. Just want to cover this with you. It's really, the voting areas are determined by population, but we also just kind of, as an informative piece, put the voting age over 18. So the difference between any of these groups and the age 18 and over is they might not be citizens, they might not have given information, they might not have the ability to vote for some reason, but we put that right column as an informative piece. The left column is really what's going to determine, how these trustee areas get apportioned, and again, population being one of the main factors there. And this is just a snapshot what we took from the largest non-white ethnic group, which was Hispanic, Latino, and this is going to give you an idea of the spread of those that ethnic group across your district. And the first thing that comes to mind is, you don't have a large area where everybody's concentrated, and so that makes it more challenging, or fun, as they would say, for us to do. But it's also a good thing, too, because when we start talking about this, there's no requirement that you have to have a minority group. You just have to look at the data and see what works for you and follow the federal and CVRA statutes. So that might not be possible here, but we have to look at it, and we have to wait till we get the latest data and further input from you all in that process. So it's just a general informative slide right now, and we'll see what happens with the 2020 census, which I don't know that this would change that much, but we'll see. And then on the issue of how lines should be drawn, this is pretty much an area where people have a lot of input. It may make sense to say, look at that bottom portion down there, which I know you can't see with this slide, but it's Los Osos Valley Road. So if we looked at the population, and the bottom portion of that is something where it made sense to make one trustee area, and then the more densely populated areas, they could be smaller. But we want to respect, natural boundaries, roads, riverbeds, lakes, whatever, because you don't want to get in the process of having to run right down the middle of the street and if you can avoid it, splitting up neighborhoods. So that's another factor that we consider, and that's also going to be where probably most of your input comes in. You may know that, X, Y, and Z neighborhoods, all the kids go to the same school, and we want to try to keep them together. So that's where your input is very crucial to this. And then some examples of what happens during the mapping process. Just as I said, sometimes people say, I'd like to keep these two neighborhoods intact. Can you do that? We'd like to keep them in the same voting areas, and if we can accommodate without having any kind of conflict with regulations or law, we can definitely consider that and do that. It's just a matter of what works for all the areas, and if we can keep those parameters intact. Another thing is that happens where I said a lot of times the community and the board gets more involved, is there's a lot of opinions on where we can split the different voting areas by boulevards, by streets, by main areas. And again, very, very important, crucial we get the community input on that. And sometimes people, in local communities know more that there's a good representation or good reason to keep certain areas intact and within a voting area. So again, this process is going to go through several months. You're going to have scenarios. The reason we have a fifth meeting instead of the required 4 is because from our experience, there's a lot of opinions on how things should be drawn, and why shouldn't you? This is a change for you. So that's why we do that fifth one, and there'll be a lot of back and forth and changes, especially once we start rolling out the map options. Now, I'm going to take questions, but I will address two main points that come up almost always, so hopefully these are your questions and I'm not wasting your time with them. We get asked a lot, what happens if we draw up these trustee areas and they get agreed upon and they're voted, but there's two people who reside in one area and then the other one is vacant? So what happens in that situation is you have to look at incumbency and you have to look at whose term expires. So if somebody expires in 2022 and another person in that same area 2024, well, you can't run elections in the empty area until that 2022 person's term expires. This process doesn't speed up anybody's term ending. It doesn't extend the term. It plays out all the way through. So if you draw up boundaries and you have 2 or 3 people in one voting area and 2 vacant areas, you have to wait until the incumbents drop off to hold an election in those blank areas. That's a question we get asked a lot. So everybody still has their seat, they're in that area, and you can run again when it's your time if you reside in that area. I've heard people say, well, can I move to that area and be in that area? I've seen that come up and happen, and I would defer to what your policies are now as far as how long somebody has to reside in an area as you have at large now, to apply that to if you go trustee. So that question comes up a lot. The other one that comes up is what happens if, say, our community doesn't have a lot of people running? We don't have that much interest. We're going to have 2 vacancies. What do we do? The surprising thing is sometimes when we do this, you'll find that people are more prone to run, even though all indications would be that you're not going to have people interested in running. And part of that's because maybe, they have a smaller area now, and if they're campaigning, they don't have to go out and do all that. They thought it was overwhelming, and maybe they're more interested because it's more relative to where they live. That happens, surprisingly, as much as the other happens. But as a solution to that, the board has the ability to appoint someone in an area if nobody runs. So you reach out to your community and you can appoint somebody and the community agrees upon, and you have that power to do that for an area if nobody chooses to run.
But then they'd have to be appointed, they'd have to live in that area, right?
Yes. Yeah, that has happened before. That comes up, and each situation is different. I don't have like a bunch of stuff in my back pocket to tell you, oh, that was Joe, he was the pastor, he was the fireman, he was the teacher, and he agreed to do it, or Susan did that, she's one of the teachers. It's always a different situation, but we'll know more about that as we continue, because one of the things that happens is you get into sequencing. You start looking up scenarios and you say, okay, whose term's going to expire, who's not, here's what we're looking at, and we'll have more information for you so that you have some advanced planning and idea of what may be drawn up and who may be in a particular area as we move forward. But that's what I wanted to cover proactively. I'm open to any questions or concerns you have. At this point, there'll be more to follow.
I guess I just wanted to confirm one thing. We have 5 directors. There will be 5 districts. Is that in our charter that we have 5 directors? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
All right, any other questions from the board? Shall I open it up for public comment? Okay, it looks like we don't have public comment, so I'll bring it back. I think at the beginning, I hope I didn't write it down wrong, but I'm wondering if you could define impaired.
So sometimes I have to turn to attorneys to define that, depending on how the voting is. Are you talking about the federal?
Right, because I realize I'm not sure how, like, I don't think we have a concentrated area of a special class. But, I mean, I guess that'll come up in a future meeting anyway.
Yeah, and, your area, like many areas of the state, are unique. You're not going to have what Los Angeles County or Kern County or parts of Santa Barbara County, south, of here have. And it's different everywhere. So the demographics are different, the populations are different. And just by going to trustee areas, these voting areas, you're going to be in compliance with the California Voting Rights Act. And it'll, if you don't, then that's where, the legal threats typically come. And it's, again, I can't predict that or not, but what we do have to do is look at that, and if it doesn't apply to you, we say we looked at that, we applied it, and then we move on. We're not always going to be able to put every ethnic group in every place, especially for situations like yours where you may not have a density in a certain area, but we do want to hit those top two areas accurately, the population, and then get your feedback as to, do these make sense? These boundaries make sense based on your community standards and what you see. And make sure that nobody's getting left out. So hopefully that explains a little more detail, but impairing is like preventing somebody's ability to vote by doing what I said,
Cracking and packing.
packing, yeah, which...
But I'm just wondering, if that's not our issue, do we have to district?
Yeah, no, I don't think that will be something that... is going to be an issue, but I mentioned that because those are two of the guidelines that you have to make sure as you do this. It may not be applicable to you because of how everybody's spread out, but those are the two we need to make sure don't happen, and the other ones are things we try to make happen whenever possible.
Okay.
Okay? Sorry, that's a long-winded answer that probably isn't as
No,
concise as you'd like.
that was my question.
Okay.
And then, is it possible to have some at-large members still? Like to have maybe 3 districts in at-large? Does that ever happen, or is it you either are districting 5 districts or?
It's at-large or by voting area.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't want, again, the point of this is that there's folks out there who are looking for bringing everyone compliant through legal means. So it's kind of an all or nothing affair, and that's just how that that cookie crumbles right now. And I don't think that it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, that could be the answer. I'm just trying to look at it from how do we keep our board seats filled,
Sure. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of feedback and a lot of questions and answers that come down the road, and it's natural. They're all valid concerns and questions, and we want to make sure that we address them in the community to the extent we can. And if there's limitations, like sorry we can't do that, we'll let you know. But we're going to try to take into account everything that makes sense, and then tell you down the road the sequencing so you can prepare for that. In the event that 3 of you or 2 of you are in one current area and there's 2 vacancies, then we're going to address that as well. But we're not going to know how any of that shapes up until later on when we plug everything in, and we're going to have more discussion on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, second public hearing on, we have public hearing for resolution 2021-19 to adopt mitigated negative declaration for Program C Low Aquifer Well Project. Ron?
Thank you. As you all know, we've been working on the Los Osos CSD program, C-Well, for quite a number of years. We've had some success and some failures when we did a test well over at the Los Osos Middle School area. Following that, we did decide to go and do a constraints analysis on 4 sites, if you recall. We narrowed that down to Site E, which is the Bay Ridge and South Bay Boulevard property that the district does own. It was the old site of the neighborhood septic system for Bay Ridge. and we found that as the preferred alternative. We then had our consultant, SWCA, proceed with the initial study, which was completed, and the result was a finding to recommend a mitigated negative declaration for the CEQA process. We did do all the legal noticing for the meeting today. We did have a 30-day comment period as well to take public comment on the initial study and the MND, mitigated negative declaration. We had 4 responses, which are in attachment 2 to the document. And so with that, we do have our consultants from Cleith Harris, geologist Spencer Harris, and we have Brandy Cummings from SWCA if you have any questions, and this is our recommendation.
Okay, does the board have any question or comment?
I have a couple questions. As this moves forward, I know there was comments about aesthetics. And so as we would go forward in something like this, will there be a point in time, I know basically, probably in my mind, the next steps would be going into a design at some point here?
Correct. We have pretty much, I guess I'd call it a conceptual plan for the site that does mention fencing, vegetation. We did have comments from one of our letters addressing that, and it was from a neighboring property. I think that would be taken care of if we have to move into a minor use permit. That would be the appropriate time to go into that type of detail. This is a CEQA document, and within our findings, we didn't see any visual impacts.
So there'd be a point in time, though, that the board and/or the public could weigh in on those things down the line?
I believe so. Again, if we're still researching whether we have to go through the minor use permit process or not, but that would be the time when we'd have another public. It's our intent to be a good neighbor over there.
Right.
But we do have to recognize costs as well.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good.
All right, anything else? All right. Let's open it up for public comment. Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Ron, if we don't go through the minor use permit process, we could always just have maybe at design, as we award the contract, sort of a public input meeting on aesthetics and that kind of thing if
We could, but we'll definitely have to be scoping this project to get cost estimates for that type of, added expense. I mean, there will be expense from landscaping that we've proposed. There will be expense from the fencing type of material that we've proposed. I did have a conversation with the adjoining property owner's representative about the north side of the property and their future plans, and I said we would cooperate on making sure aesthetically that it was not degrading from his property.
Yeah, we have other facilities throughout town, and I don't hear complaints about them, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of our facilities aren't in the commercial area. This is kind of a mix. You have commercial on one side, residential on the other. But again, we want to be good neighbors.
I'd rather be in the commercial area than the residential areas, actually.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, do I hear a motion?
Yes, I move that the board adopt resolution 2021-19 adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the Program C Lower Aquifer Well Project.
And I'll go ahead and second.
Thank you. Laura?
Director Sesenia?
Yes.
Director Oholsky?
Yes.
Vice President Fourcroy?
Yes.
President Womack?
Yes. All right. Now we're moving to general action items. First one is approval of a joint water purveyor letter to the Coastal Commission and County of San Luis Obispo regarding water availability for new accessory dwelling unit development. Ron?
Yes. kind of going back in time here, this is a subject that's been discussed at the BMC level. We really haven't had anything at the board level. We did get a request back in January from the county to start discussions about a coastal commission request for the three water purveyors to weigh in on water water availability for accessory dwelling units, ADUs. It was decided between the three water purveyors that it would be a better effort if we all got together, talked about it, and did a joint letter. We went through that process. That's S&T Mutual, Golden State Water Company, and the CSD. Went through that process, developed a draft letter. At our April 21st UAC meeting, we did have the county come in and explain some roles and responsibilities to the UAC. And at that time, I had discussed some of the key points that we were considering, the three purveyors were considering to have in that letter. At our May 19th meeting, we did take the draft letter to, we did update to the UAC at that point because it was still taking some time to work out the details of the language to those key points. And then at the July 21st UAC meeting, we went through the letter. There's quite a bit of conversation. There was some input in terms of thinking the letter should be more firm and to the point on certain things. And I expressed that, this was a joint letter and that we had to get consensus between three parties to arrive at what we got. But at the end of that meeting, they did recommend approval of the letter to the Board of Supervisors. I'll go quickly over the key points in the letter. I think the key thing, and one of the most important things, is that the three purveyors all agree that there's an overreaching concern regarding the current sustainability of the groundwater basin. And this is based on our monitoring data and our last couple of annual reports that we've, that has the results of our monitoring. To that end, we requested that the county initiate a study to identify the remaining opportunities for retrofits in Title 19, using Title 19 as the county's key way of having development occur without having a more sustainable water supply at this point in time. We wanted them to update the assumptions because we believe there's some that are in error. And the county has initiated or is about to initiate a study that we've requested, so that's positive. We wanted the county to revisit Title 19 and make amendments that provide for verification. Right now, they use the assumptions in Title 19 for the different values of offsets to come up with a number, but there's not been any verification or study to see if those offsets are actually working. So we're going to insist on verification using water purveyor data. We wanted if and when the offsets are used, that they come from the area where the proposed development is going to occur. For instance, if it's a new home down or an ADU down in Sunset Terrace, S&T, the offset would have to occur within the S&T Mutual water area. We thought this would be the best way to spread them out to make sure each area was getting their fair share of the net neutral water. There has been, and I know Charlie Cody here from S&T Mutual, they had their board meeting, I think it was last Thursday night, and they added some language that of their concern over the basin metric, the basin yield metric in particular, that was stating they didn't agree with that metric. My position on that is that the key message from even including that table that was out of the annual report was that the basin yield metric isn't the only metric that we need to look at. We need to look at the chloride metric, the water level metric, and the nitrate metric, and especially the two the water level and chloride metrics are extremely important. So though I agree or understand, I should say, S&T's desire to include that, I don't think it will add any value to the letter or the message that we're trying to make. With that, I'll open up to any questions that you might have.
Oh, please. Get back to the board.
This question is for the attorney. So this isn't precluded by the state ADU law, is that correct?
I don't believe it is, no.
So the county adopting their ordinance, we just deal with that, okay?
Yeah.
That was my question. All right, thank you.
Anything else from the board?
No, right now.
All right, let's open it up for public comment.
I have one public comment that was emailed into me.
Okay.
This is from Patrick McGibney from the Osos Sustainability Group. He writes, "Good evening to all the brave souls who risked this in-person meeting. Not willing to risk attending in the light of the Delta variant, these would have been my spoken comments. This joint letter you've written was to make a clear and concise message to the county and then to the Coastal Commission. Whether the three purveyors believe there is sufficient water in our basin to add more ADUs and residential housing at this time. Over the last 12 months, letters to the county from the purveyors have basically said no, there is not. This letter kind of hints at that also. All of the current and past data and most of the metrics indicate that there isn't sufficient water for more growth, and maybe not even enough for the current population. The one metric that disputes this is the current basin yield metric. You know, a BYM of under 80 indicates a margin of safety for the community. As you know, there is not, but it is this perceived margin of safety we believe the county is using to approve new development over our basin. Whether this includes a new meter or not is irrelevant. It's allowing more water use from our basin, which is an overdraft promoting further seawater intrusion. The basin yield metric currently used in 73 calculated from the safe yield of 2760 AFY, and we all know how this came about. The 2760 was presented in a 2017 Cleith Harris Tech memo, where the model showed that if program A and C were complete, then 2760 AFY could be a sustainable yield. It was then passed on to the 2017 AMR as the safe yield and on to every other AMR, including the 2020 AMR. The problem is that program A and C were never completed, nor have they been yet. S&T realized this, so they voted no in approving the 2020 AMR. So back to your letter. As you know, S&T also agreed to put a caveat next to their signature stating that the BYM of 73 is in dispute. Data does not support this metric, nor does the bulk of your letter. So joining S&T and signing this letter with the caveat next to your signature does several things. First, it does not accept the BYM of 73 and thus a sustainable yield of 2760. It is consistent with what this and your past letters try to express, that we do not have sustainable yield at this time, and it supports S&T in making a bold and correct call. Please sign this letter with the caveat and encourage Golden State to join you. It's the right thing to do, and I believe you know it is. One last thought. Remember in the Los Osos Community Plan, in the introduction, where it says, it is vital that bold, decisive, and immediate action be taken. That hasn't happened yet. Let this be the beginning.
All right, thank you for that comment. Any other public comments? All right, I'll bring it back to the board.
I guess my thoughts on this basin yield metric issue, and I kind of see that maybe it was a mistake to move to that higher number prior to the completion of those programs that number is based on. I mean, I think that's a legitimate argument. I don't really want to slow down this letter over that, but I certainly understand that point. Where it, I guess, comes into direct play maybe is if the county is referencing the basin yield metric in their ADU approvals. Is that the reason they're approving ADUs? And I have not read enough of the applications or approvals to know that. That to me would be problematic if the county was actually referencing that as a reason to allow ADUs. But I don't know, I haven't read enough about the permits.
Right now, under Title 19, they're using the water offset program as the approval process. It's
Okay.
not the basin yield metric. Where the basin yield metric, where that shows up is in the Los Osos Community Plan, and that hasn't been approved yet. And if I can just add that part of the BMC work plan this year is to look at all the metrics, including the basin yield metric. We're started that process. We'll have probably daylight a proposed update based on the BMC staff working on this in September. And what I could see happening here, first I'd like to address Patrick's comment about completing programs A and C. That's not the premise. Program A, for the most part, has been completed. The one that was included that hasn't been completely completed is our Upper Aquifer 8th Street well. And that's maybe between 60 to 75 acre feet of that 2,760. The Program C, the number only includes the Golden State Water Los Osos Well 1, Los Olivos Well 1. It doesn't include the whole Program C. So the only thing that could be disputed right now is that the 8th Street Upper Aquifer well in that number in terms. But that said, there are concerns about the assumptions that go into the sustainable yield number that will be debated and publicly discussed so we can come to agreement. So the way I envision this is if we change that number, the sustainable yield number, we can update this letter to reflect what is really the true information. Right now, we don't know, or there's dispute in it, I guess. And so until the BMC goes through that process, and it has been in the annual report since 2017, I feel it'd be better for us to stick with the number, go through our process at the BMC, and if it changes, we update this to the Coastal Commission.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, that is the one thing that's going to come out of this is that we're reevaluating that basin yield metric and that whole number and looking at reduced rainfall, other assumptions that went into the model, just taking a whole tear down of the model and looking at it again. That's been something people have been asking for a couple of years. And so we're finally getting to that point where I feel good about the Basin Management Committee's efforts. Yeah, and we can always, I think that we'll probably have that updated number before the LCP is up for evaluation. So we have plenty of time to add.
Absolutely. We'll have this wrapped up by the end of the year, probably sooner, but by the end of the year.
Okay.
And the Coastal Commission has indicated they're not going to do anything with the ADU ordinance until we get to the community plan update.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I got something to say. I appreciate the conversation about the basin yield metric, but like Ron was saying, the county's logic really doesn't have anything to do with the BYM. It's about Title 19 and 2-to-1 offsets. So the part in the letter that I'm most focused on was the request for a water survey, a usage survey, and calling for more accountability with actual data out of Title 19. I think I will be supporting and pushing on those pieces most, and I think that the yield metric will be discussed at great length at BMC, and hopefully we can come up with something that's accurate.
Yeah, I agree with you. I see you nodding.
Yes.
All right, any further discussion? All right, do I hear a motion?
I move the board approve the letter to the County of San Luis Obispo and the California Coastal Commission stating the district's position regarding water availability for accessory dwelling unit development as presented.
I'll second that, and I appreciate your thoughts, Matthew, about the whole Title 19, the water conservation study. Those things have not been looked at and ever really tightly. So thank you for getting that in the letter.
Laura, may we have a roll call? I'm sorry?
Do you need a roll call for this one, or just? No.
Oh, it's just,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. All right, request for board direction to transition from broadcasting on Channel 20.
Thank you. As everyone is aware, we've been broadcasting, the district's been broadcasting on Channel 20 since the year 2000. There's been some upgrades to the system over the years. In 2003, we got a PEG grant from the county to buy equipment. In 2013, that equipment was failing, so we got another grant to upgrade it. And now the equipment is towards the end of its life again, here in 2021. Here, let me do. The reason the staff was pushing ahead with this is that we know a lot of things have changed since year 2000 in terms of technology, the way people receive information, the way they hear their news. And so we wanted to, and also because of our Zoom experience for the last year, almost year and a half, of how streaming and other technologies or platforms could help participation. Like tonight, if we would have had some sort of hybrid, I know Patrick would have attended virtually. So we're looking towards seeing if there's other alternatives out there. Currently, Channel 20 operations and maintenance cost us about $450 a month, and it's become expensive, or is expensive, for we feel the viewership out there, and that's one of the reasons in our recommendation we're requesting that you direct us to discontinue that. I did want to point out in my recommendation there's an error, one word actually, in number 2, approve discontinuing broadcasting on Channel 20 and continue to live stream meetings on slow span. That was kind of my misunderstanding about how AGP video actually handles our broadcasting. We've been streaming on slow span for all these years, and so that would continue just streaming, because we've been broadcasting on Channel 20 streaming, which is internet-based, through slow span. Like tonight even, we're streaming on slow span right now. The difference would be if we could discontinue on Channel 20, we would then request AGP rebroadcast our videos on Channel 21, which is the county channel. So there'll still be the opportunity for people to see the rebroadcast, though it wouldn't be as scheduled as regularly, since that channel has a lot of other government agencies that use it. So with all this, we just feel it's a time and it's prudent for us to explore all the alternatives available to the district. The reason for our motion number 1 is to just give us staff direction to take the time and go through, research the alternatives, look at how much each would cost, and come back with a recommendation that we would feel would be more reflective of how people are now receiving information. And then, of course, number 2 would be to discontinue broadcasting on Channel 20, which would save us $450 a month. With that, I can answer any questions.
All right, great idea. Any questions or comments from the board?
I just have a comment that I'm in favor of us discontinuing Channel 20, and I am hoping that we can end up in some sort of hybrid approach here. I thought it was great to have the participation that we had on Zoom, and although I think we should be having in-person meetings while we can, I would like that continued input.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
I totally agree. I like the inclusion of the Zoom aspect, the hybrid type of thing. I found that I go to a lot more meetings just because I don't always want to get in the car. You're tuning in sometimes just in case there's something good. And it expanded the ability for people to tune in, and I like that. And as cool as it was having Channel 20 all to ourselves, I think it's a good idea to probably not be the only district with your own television channel. So yeah, I support both of these.
All right. Let me open it up for public comment. And seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion, or do I hear a motion?
I'm sort of, and I've had that same thought about the hybrid meeting kind of thing. So if you're going to go with, see, I'm really in favor of the first motion because that would bring back the options to us before we discontinue 20. But under either motion, I just want to make sure that staff understands that our not number one priority, but a priority is the hybrid meeting in the future going forward. So I'm not supportive of the second motion at this time. I'm supportive of the first one, but I think either one, we just need that hybrid meeting as the major item.
So I'm hearing you say you don't really want to discontinue before we have another plan in place that
Correct.
the public can hear our meetings.
Correct.
That's reasonable.
They would still hear them on Channel 21, but just not as frequently, and we would still be
And
streaming.
randomly.
Yeah.
What's our viewership on Channel 20?
That's speculative.
According to AGP, as best they can tell, very low.
Like 20 people, so that's a lot of money per person. That's pretty expensive. But
Well, I'll make a motion, see what happens. I move that the board direct staff to research and compile information for broadcasting alternatives, especially the hybrid approach, and bring back a recommendation for the board's consideration at a future board meeting. Also, I move that the board approve discontinuing broadcasting on Channel 20 and continue live streaming on slow span.
I'll second that.
Can I make a suggestion that you amend that motion, so instead of saying a future board meeting, at next month's board meeting, because I don't want this to drag out.
I don't know if we could do this justice in a month.
We'll try.
We can try.
Well, I'd just like to see it come back sooner than later.
Why don't you give us to October?
okay. Is that okay?
That's up to the motion maker.
Okay, I'll modify that to say, come back with a recommendation by October board meeting.
Okay, so we don't need a roll call vote, we just, all in favor?
No, I agree with
Chuck,
that.
Chuck
did you agree to
seconded.
the,
Yes, I agree to the amended motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstaining? Okay, I think the motion passes. All right. I'd like to open it up for public comment for items not on the agenda. And seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Next, we have administrative and committee reports. Fire department report, please. I see you there.
We're halfway in person, right? Progress. Paul Province, if you haven't met me, I'm the battalion chief, arrived here May last year, and good to finally see some people in person and not on the Zoom meetings. With the fire department report, emergency activity, we ran 139 calls between June 22nd and July 21st, 86 medical aids, 14 traffic collisions, 9 reported as fires, and 18 public service assists, and 11 false alarms. And then the company 15 volunteers or reserves were recalled to respond to the station 6 times during that time period. Station 15, which continue to do a response for COVID. Obviously, we've had a resurgence. We haven't really seen an uptick in the call volumes related to COVID here in the Los Osos area, but as it enters into the county and starts to spread, I imagine that we will start to see an uptick in the area. And so we just ask people to be vigilant, stay healthy. The advice that I give my troops is make sure that you're getting your sleep. Talk to your physician about a vitamin regimen. Make sure that you're eating healthy and that you have healthy lifestyles and you get out and get lots of fresh air. And being in the community here, there's lots of fresh air to get, so go out and get it. Special programs and projects. Don't have a whole lot to report on just yet, but do have some new information that actually will be an ad. But during the month of June, we had a reserve firefighter candidate, Mr. Breck Dreyfus. He's completing his steps of becoming an employee. With COVID, we haven't necessarily been able to have our academies that we traditionally would have, so we're having to do a lot of the training in-house. And so it takes a lot longer to get everybody through the day, being that we're out running calls, and so staying focused on the task of getting through their task books and getting them oriented. Right now, we're at about 13 reserve firefighters for the program. We've been losing folks through attrition. Either they're getting jobs other places or they're just moving on in general, but we've been successful at getting people through paramedic school and getting them through their internships. And then they're getting jobs elsewhere in CAL FIRE or elsewhere with other fire departments. So that's been a very successful program. Just today, we reflew the positions for reserve firefighters and we left it open-ended so that we can continue to get people to apply and try to attract more members. Typically, we can run a staff of about 20 reserves, but we've been kind of having trouble with the numbers. And as I go down and speak about our trainings, our bi-monthly drills that we have with reserves, because of the limitations of COVID, we weren't necessarily able to have as many of those drills. And that typically, for especially the younger folks that are getting started, they tend to lose interest if they can't come in person and get to those drills and have that meeting with the other reserve firefighters, in my experience. So as we're able to open that up, that should help with some of the retention issues with some of the newer folks, and being able to get them to academies will help with some of the retention. But as you can see, we're having a little kind of hiccup, and we may have to pause that for a little bit. On July 16th, we had a little excitement here in town. We had an exterior fence fire, and it's just minor property loss damage. Nobody was injured, and the fire was extinguished. During the month of June, I said we had the bi-monthly drills resumed, which is, it's always good to get them out there and get their hands on it in the training environment. That way we can run repetitious drills. They can learn from each other's mistakes as well as their own, and we can put them through different scenarios. So hopefully we can continue that with outdoor activities. Weed abatement. So weed abatement inspections, the second round went out. We went out and did our second round of inspections. And we will be sending out the letters this week for the second round violators, looking for compliance on getting that done. This year we tried to get that stuff done earlier in order to get people to be mowing their grasses when the grasses were still green, so that we have less incidents of fire being started because people are trying to abate the weeds that cause the fires. Locally here in town, we have received a lot of interest in the El Moro bike path, and we've been working with county staff and providing recommendations on getting that mitigated. So it is on the forefront, and we all are also looking at some other areas around. Just here the other day was in the news, up property, the county property on Broderson, between Broderson and Alexander. They were doing some fuels removal in there. Just took a walk up there this morning. It looks real nice. They did a lot of work on the non-native species, the eucalyptus grove, and kind of cleared it out there. So good progress up in there. One thing that I would like to add that's not on the agenda because I just got the information today, but I will be flying back to North Dakota August 30th to go see the new fire engine. So hopefully next meeting I will have some pictures to share with you of your bright new red fire engine.
Oh, you have to bring it in.
Well, it might be kind of hard to carry. It's still going to be in North Dakota.
Oh, it's still there?
It won't fit
well,
in my carry-on.
When it comes in, it comes.
But yeah, when it comes in, we'll do a whole ceremony for putting it into service and all that when we get it here. But good progress. We're finally getting closer to the finish line and getting that vehicle here and getting it rolling down the road.
Okay, pictures are good in the meantime.
Yep, that's the best I can do for you now.
Okay.
Any questions?
So the mitigations this year, how many are there? Are they kind of up from last year, down from last year?
It's kind of the same areas. It's mostly the vacant lots that are the issue, and it just kind of takes time to get going, getting the right notifications through. Sometimes folks wait till we give them the second notice before they actually go after and do it. So hopefully we'll have those taken care of pretty quick, and then ultimately what we'll do is as we go to the final notice and go to the I don't want to call it forced mitigation, but where we go in and do it for them, we'll evaluate the properties that are more of a fire danger or more in the severe areas as the funding will allow us to do.
All right, great. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, comment. I appreciate you talking about the fuel reduction up on Broderson to Alexander. Today's a good day to talk about this. Just my little bit of background. I grew up in Paradise, California, and my family has a house on the west shore of Lake Almanor, and other family is in Greenville. So those places didn't do so well lately. Do we have sufficient defensible space behind us here?
So what I will say is that we just had a pretty sizable meeting here with some folks, and we're looking at doing a vegetation treatment program for the Los Osos area in specific, and some of the fire breaks that have already been put in, looking at building off of those and making them more robust, but also making it so that it's memorialized, so that we have a long-term plan in place with maintenance built into it. And so some of the challenges of putting in all of these fire breaks and having shaded fuel breaks go in, or just full-blown mitigations going in where we come in and masticate and do things like that, is there's a lot of environmental studies and permissions and permits that need to be done in order to get those things done.
Sure.
And they have expiration dates on them. So some of the challenges is we don't have all those things memorialized with a long-term plan to where we can come in. Not only do we do the initial work, but then we come in and maintenance that work.
Sure.
And some of the things that I've noticed around town is that we've gone in and we've done the work, but we need to maintenance the work in order to keep it viable as a fire break. Somebody I was speaking to, one of the local residents here, we were talking about what that kind of means. And so you go up into the manzanita patches and up there, and you have large trees, large manzanita. We're talking about fuels that take 1,000 hours to dry out. We go in there and we mitigate that stuff. We masticate it, we cut it, we burn it, we remove it, and then it's replaced. And what's it replaced with? Typically it's replaced with grass at first, which is a 1-hour fuel, which means 1 hour sunshine and it's ready to burn. Mm-hmm. So that 1 hour fuel now takes a fuel that would normally be like if you took a log and you put a lighter to that log and tried to light it on fire. Nothing's going to happen probably, or it's going to take a very long exposure. Where if I take that log and I chop it up into sawdust and I apply that same lighter, it burns very readily with just a short amount of time. So that being said, not having those mitigations to go in there and maintenance that new fuel that's in there is a problem. So we're looking at doing something long-term and doing a large-scale plan for the entire community so that there is good clearance around the entire community for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that description. So
it'll take time. It's a long process, and there's a lot of control agencies that we'll have to work with to get it done. And make sure that the environment, the resources are protected and all that. But we are looking, it's on the radar, and we're going to work on it.
Yeah, so is Fire Safe Council part of that discussion?
Yes.
Okay, so anybody that wants more info or to get involved in that, Fire Safe Council would be the best way?
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Paul, could you introduce Chief Swanson back there for us?
Chief Swanson is my supervisor. He's the division chief that oversees about half the county. So I don't know if he's got anything else he wants to say. But
yes.
I took over the coastal division, coastal and south division, from Chief Owens, who promoted up to the deputy chief of the unit back into December.
We appreciate your being here, so thank you.
Absolutely, thanks.
Do you know if any of the fuel reduction proposals are talked about in terms of the habitat conservation plan? Because the community plan needs that habitat conservation plan. It would be nice to have these activities included in that. I don't know if the county's thought that way or not.
I'm sure there'll be some elements of that included. We've got foresters and environmental scientists on our staff that'll be primarily putting all that stuff together and working with the cooperators to make sure that those questions are answered.
Okay, it seems like Fish and Wildlife is going to be a key player there.
Absolutely, both state and federal.
Yeah, it would be, right.
Yep.
And now they're both Fish and Wildlife. It'd be nice to have to deal with them once, but it's probably
Yeah,
too
and
much to
being
ask.
somebody that's new coming into the area and trying to decipher all the different areas and different sensitivities, having something that you can hand to somebody, the next guy that comes in when I decide I don't want to do this anymore, having a document that they can look at or a plan they can look at and take it and carry it on for the next 10 years is the goal.
Yeah, and hopefully we're lucky until we get to that point.
Yeah. So one message that I have conveyed to a lot of the residents out in that area is the defensible space, having your defensible space going, making sure that the trees are trimmed off your roof, making sure your gutters are empty, making sure that you have adequate clearance around your structure on your own property. That was part of the chipping events that have been occurring here in the local area. So making sure that you do your part to provide a good defense so that we can provide the offense and come in and get it done. So, and if you need any assistance with that, you're more welcome to give us a call. The station, we'll come out and give you some ideas of what you can and can't do. And we also have lots of literature. And the goal next year will be to go out and really start walking the streets, especially up in the urban interface area along the state responsible area to get a lot more of that information out in person.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's a great offer. Thank you. All right, Sheriff's report. Thank you for being here too.
Good evening, members of the board, staff, members of the public. I'm Stuart MacDonald from the Sheriff's Office, Coast Station here in Los Osos, reporting for our activity in July 2021. From July 1st to July 31st, there were 627 calls for service in Los Osos. That compares to the same month last year where we had 614, so just a very slight uptick in the number. We had 6 assault or battery calls for service. 2 of those were domestic violence circumstances. 4 of them were actual hitting and pushing between roommates, neighbors, and others. We had 43 disturbance calls. 10 of those were family disturbances. We had 9 loud music complaints, 5 neighborhood disputes, disputes between neighbors, and 2 fight calls. Fortunately, there were 0 burglaries reported in July. We had 4 thefts. 2 of those calls were thefts from items from unlocked vehicles, and 2 of those actually, upon further investigation, were unfounded. Nothing was actually stolen. There were 6 vandalism calls. We had a broken window to the old schoolhouse at the community park. And there were 4 reports of vehicles that were damaged and egged. And then there was 1 report of slashed tires. That situation had a known suspect, and so we documented and sent it off for prosecution. There were 7 reports of mail theft during the month of July. And I just noted 3 of those calls included package thefts. One of those was on the 1700 block of Martingale Avenue, the 2000 block of Doris, and the 700 block of Woodland. There were 3 phone scams. One was a PayPal scam. One was a Social Security scam, and one was a arrest warrant scam. And so I like to just mention what those scams are, just to remind the public and that when you get calls from people asking for sensitive information, it takes all kinds of forms. They could be portraying themselves as a financial institute. They could be saying they're from the Social Security Administration. They could be saying that that you have a warrant for your arrest, or that a loved one has been arrested, those kinds of things. And almost universally, they are requesting payments with prepaid gift or debit cards. That's the huge red flag. Anyone asking for anything in payment through a gift card or prepaid credit card should immediately be discounted and discontinued conversation. And we do ask that that you do report that to our office so that we can stay abreast of the current scams that are going through the community, so that as we make our way to these meetings, we can share that with the public. There were 33 suspicious circumstance calls. 6 of those were suspicious vehicles, 14 were suspicious subjects, 13 were other suspicious circumstances. The deputies that work in the Los Osos community to keep us safe do proactive policing through efforts like enforcement stops. There were 65 stops during the month of July. Those included 44 vehicle stops, 14 suspicious subjects, 2 bicycle stops, and 19 pedestrian stops during the month. They also engage in activities such as patrol checks, bar checks, extra patrols, foot patrol, other kinds of getting out of the vehicle or going to a specific place to be seen and to check specific things in a preventative role. And there were 38 such activities logged during July. And then the last thing I wanted to just share with the community is that in the month of July, of those 627 calls for service or activities that we engaged in, there were a total of 57 such activities on the 2,000 block of Palisades. So with that, I will open for questions from the board or the public.
Any questions or comments from the board?
A quick comment, just the only questions I've been getting around town from neighbors or at the hardware store are all revolving around Palisades. So I appreciate you kind of putting that into perspective. What are you seeing? What are the issues and the impacts to our community on that block of Palisades?
Yeah, so, obviously, we were down there for all kinds of things. I say there's 57 logged activities down there. Many of those are our self-initiated foot patrols and extra patrol of that area. Actual calls from the public to go there for some complaint or some activity that they've seen and are reporting. That's only a fraction of the calls of that 57. But we are down there and we're making arrests. There is drug use. There are disturbances between the residents living down there. So we will get occasional calls indicating that maybe someone is chasing after someone else with a stick, that sort of thing. And additionally, we are down there enforcing certain enforceable codes like county codes dealing with trash dumping and rubbish. We're conducting probation searches. We're doing all kinds of activity down there over the course of the month, as time goes by. And the county is working toward trying to find other locations for safe parking and supportive housing type circumstances for our unhoused neighbors. So that as the Board of Supervisors and county management and administration work toward identifying appropriate places for that, we're very hopeful that in the near to medium term, we will be able to start transitioning people who are camping in that area away from that area.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, that helps kind of confirm what I've seen and what I'm being told as far as drug use, people chasing other people with sticks, assaults, those kinds of things. What I'm hearing about mostly and witnessing from neighbors and people talking to me is avoidance. Our community members avoiding the area, which is a shame because it's the library,
Absolutely,
the children's park, the tennis courts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is sad that we have chunks of people just saying enough. We're just going to wait it out, basically.
Right. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that that we're going to have some solutions in place, like I said, in the short to medium term that will help us transition people away from there as a living circumstance and be able to return it to the community members for recreational purposes in the library and so. And just as an aside, I'm also a resident of Los Osos, and so I share the concerns with all of my neighbors here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the update. I'll probably keep asking about it just because I'm getting so many people talking to me, and it's not really any of my business on this board, but
sure, absolutely.
It's good to understand what's going on and what's not going on.
Right, and if the solutions were simple, we would have made them, right? So,
sure, exactly.
So it's, we're absolutely all trying to work toward as positive outcomes as we can for everybody involved.
So. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here in person. Nice to see you.
Yes, it's nice to meet you.
Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to say about utilities, or I get in trouble when I skip over it?
Well, I think that we'll get a report from Ron. But you know what? I did want to follow up on this last discussion. And I didn't note it in my LOCAC notes, but LOCAC spent a lot of time on the Palisades issue at their last meeting. They do have a homeless subcommittee that they've set up.
Well, wait, that's later. You can do LOCAC later.
Okay, I was just going to, while we were on that
Then
issue.
it's Ron, and I'll loop it back to LOCAC.
Sure.
Okay, General Manager's report, please.
Yes, if there are any questions on the Utilities Department report, please ask. It's pretty straightforward. The good news is that run times on Palisades are way down, so that's a positive. Got a couple of really kind of good news things on the 8th Street Upper Aquifer well. We did a notice of award to Hartzell General Engineering Contractors. They were the low bid at $207,300. Our engineering estimate was $310,000. So we're in the process with them now gathering all the documents we need for liability insurance, bonding, et cetera. So we're hoping to have that all in the next week here and get a schedule. I assume we'll be moving forward with the construction last part of August. So that's great. Part of our this year's fiscal budget, we included another vehicle purchase. I had $50,000 in the budget. We found a truck locally at a dealership for $33,700. So again, bought local and came under budget quite a bit, so we're very happy about that. Definitely want to have a drought reminder out there. We're in a severe level D3, or is it severe or extreme, Margaret? Where are we at? It's been changing.
Yeah, it's extreme.
Okay, we're extreme. Sorry about that. We did go over, and I guess I could let Chuck talk about this, about the water shortage contingency plan, but you're going to be seeing more messaging from us in multiple ways, especially within our district. And finally, I wanted to, it's not related to the district, but People Helping People are having their rummage sale this Friday and Saturday. Friday from 12 to 4, Saturday 8 to 2. This is a great fundraiser. both for the community center and some of their charities that they support. So encourage people to come out. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions from the board or? Thanks, Ron. Okay, now, LoCac.
Okay, well, I submitted a written report. You can see what I basically talked with them about. But two things that I did not put in my report is that I emphasized to them that they would be seeing much more from the district in terms of water conservation messaging. That was just something that obviously is back at the top of, I think we're in a worse place than we were in 2014-15 statewide. They're talking about exceptional conditions. And the other thing was that LoCac did spend a lot of time on the Palisades issue. There seemed to be a couple different approaches from the community. One, I'm sure everybody's heard about the petition to open up Rancho El Chorro as a temporary solution. Some at LoCac, the subcommittee weren't particularly fond of that idea, and I think with the recognition that for the homeless people that are local here, they're not going to want to leave Los Osos. So that's going to be maybe a solution for out-of-area campers, that kind of thing. And it'll take multiple solutions. They're also talking about showers at the 10th Street County facility there, across from, next to Kuma, kind of along that side of the street. A couple hours a week, that kind of thing, maybe doing some of that. So there's a couple different directions that are going on, and it's sad. And so everybody needs to pay attention to that. And the rest you can see in writing what I did.
All right, thanks for adding some color. Parks and Rec.
We had a very, very simple but rewarding meeting. Basically, we just recognized our new pathway and let the committee actually meet each other in person for the first time in forever. We all enjoyed it. We got a few photos. I don't know, are those up yet?
They're not.
Okay,
Sorry.
they'll be up soon, I'm sure. But we did a little photo op, and the path's great. People were using it. So.
Well, it's very handy to have an engineer on the board that can move this stuff through. So thank you for all your work on that.
Thanks,
It's
Chris.
great. I use it all the time.
Yeah, I really like it also.
All right. So now I'm seeing Utilities Advisory Committee meeting report again. Or I guess I did that wrong.
Ron's pretty well gone through. We've talked about all the important updates. There's a lot happening, and it's all good. All right. Coming online, and the water conservation. I am anxious to see about the water conservation messaging, because we've done different things in the past, and I don't know if they move the needle a lot, but we haven't had your ideas. So, everybody stay tuned for that.
All right. Thank you. So for the Finance Advisory Committee report, it's mostly the regular things. We approved the minutes. They recommended we approve the minutes. The committee recommended we approve the warrant register, and the committee recommended we receive and file the financial reports. The one thing a little bit different is we formed a subcommittee. Julian and I are going to look into our interest rate options and see if we can wiggle out of any of the fees we've had. And I think Marshall and Ron and I were thinking that this is something we do at least annually and maybe more often if conditions warrant it. And that's it for the...
Can I just make
Yes, please.
just one correction of what you said?
Oh, okay.
The committee did approve their minutes.
Okay. But the rest, they just recommended that
Right.
we approve it. Okay. And, let's see, no ESAC this month. Do we have any director announcements of district or community interest reports or attendance at public meetings, training programs, conferences, or seminars? Okay. And I don't believe we have any previously asked questions outstanding, do we?
We do not.
Okay. All right.
Well, wait, the BMC meeting, Ron. I should report on the BMC meeting.
Sure.
Just,
go ahead.
it's been talked about a lot, so I think the primary thing is that we decided to do, we're moving forward with the staff working on coming up with the process for the sustainable yield numbers, et cetera. So staff has been working since that meeting. We're going to have a report back and direction at our September meeting. We've canceled the August meeting. And then our goal is to have the new process in place and then updated numbers by the time of our annual report, which is the end of the year. That's pretty much it, right, Ron?
Exactly. I just want to emphasize that as we do these updates, we are requesting a lot of public input. So there's agreement when we do finally decide how to arrive at the sustainable yield.
Right. So we'll have our first report out at our September meeting where the staff will bring forward the process that they're proposing, and then we'll have public input at that meeting and then decide how to move forward.
All right, terrific. Thanks for that report. Any questions? Okay. All right. Let's open it up for public comment for items on the administrative and committee reports and the consent agenda.
You have to see if anybody wants to
Did anyone want to
pull.
pull anything from the consent agenda? Okay. Hearing none. We'll move to public comment. And I see no public comment, so I'll bring it back to the board. And
I'll make a motion to receive and file the administrative and committee reports and approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
all right, do we do a roll call vote for this? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, does anyone on the board have a future agenda item to add? Does anyone on the board have any closing comments?
I would just like to bring up the rummage sale again that's happening Friday and Saturday at the community center. I think that's people helping people event, and I think it's very, very important. So I think that anybody that is looking to buy anything, and even if you're not, just to support the people helping people, I think it's a good event.
And I have it on good authority that they have so much stuff that if you go on Friday, go back Saturday. Because they have rooms they haven't even started emptying yet. In fact, they're going to have another sale probably in September or October because they haven't been able to for a while. One other thing, Monday night at the community center, Jimmy Paulding's going to be in town for a little town hall get-together. Probably meet and greet. He ran in the District 4 supervisor's race last time. So why here? I don't know. But it'd be a good chance to meet somebody that wants to be on your board of supervisors.
All right, interesting.
I had a little comment. Are we, I think we had talked possibly maybe we could move the next board of directors
I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
So we were in closed session kind of realizing Matthew won't be here, Marshall won't be here, and it kind of interferes with the Labor Day holiday. And could we maybe have our next meeting the second Thursday of the month? So I could have a quorum. And I think it is the 9th.
Yes.
So I don't know, is that?
The one thing that I was looking at is with regard to your redistricting meeting, I think you mean to have another one at that time. And we could check with the consultant, but the election code requires that the first two public meetings happen within 30 days. So it has to be within 30 days of today.
She's right. That is right.
Could we have a special meeting earlier for just the redistricting?
Yeah.
Well,
We-
what happens if we don't have a quorum at that meeting?
There's no decisions. It's a public hearing to get input.
Oh. So we could do, thank you for figuring that out before we left.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so maybe we do have the meeting, maybe, can we have 2 meetings? Is that horrible?
Well, you have a special meeting on the 2nd and then your regular meeting on the
Just for
9th.
that
On the
one
9th.
agenda item.
Does that sound, that makes sense to me. What does everybody think?
I think that'd work great, because then
Okay.
we've got our consultant scheduled, and we wouldn't have to change that, so.
We don't have to reschedule, and we're within our 30-day.
And we're not making
parameter.
decisions that day.
Right. We're just
Yeah, input.
seeing the lay of the land.
Okay, so let's do that. So a special meeting on the 2nd, or no,
Special on the 9th.
special on the 9th, sorry, yes.
Oh, no, is it special meeting's the 2nd, where we'll go over just that one item, and then the regular meeting will be the 9th? Where-
But if the 2nd is our already scheduled meeting, wouldn't that be our regular meeting?
But you can.
That's what I want to,
Can you change it? Okay,
that's
yeah,
that's what I want to change. Okay, so, all right, well, it was lovely seeing real people, even with masks.
Everything.
I love it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was great to get our committee reports in person, just wonderful. So it's great seeing you. And if I don't see you before then, have a great Labor Day holiday. And I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. There you go.